everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of Murphy's Law. Before I hop in, I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody who's been supportive. This has been an awesome ride, and I am ready to just keep pumping out content. Speaking of people who've been absolutely amazing in helping me do this, I want to say welcome to Jenna. Hey, Jenna.
Hi.
You are convincingly at the park.
I am sitting outside. I'm having a picnic virtually.
The virtually is the important thing. I'm loving the green screen. That is super, super cool.
Thank you. It just came in. Thank you so much for inviting me and letting me try it out. And
absolutely. Before we recorded, for people who are wondering, let's see, I sent Jenna to Hawaii, and I'm thinking of other places where I can send Jenna in the future. If you have an idea where you would like us to send Jenna, pop it in the comments. That would be fun. So, Jenna, we're going to be going over an episode of the Atheist Experience that you did a while back, and it is the first episode that you ever did with Dawn.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've got the first clip here as the intro. Let's hop right in.
I'm very well. So, I want to talk about the evidence for the resurrection, particularly the evidence pertaining to the post-resurrection appearances experienced by the disciples after Jesus' death.
Okay. So what's your history with this? What do you kind of know about this kind of argument? I know it's been a while, so now that some time.
I don't know much. I know that there's word about the apostles gathered together and decided to create the Catholic Church and spread the word, and that's how the Bible got started being written, and then the Catechism was developed.
Okay. So what he's going to put forward is a very specific argument that I think has picked up some traction in the last maybe 2 decades. I know that it was something that popped up back when I was in church, and before he does, though. Actually, you know what? I'll just hop right into it. I'll talk about it afterward. Here we go.
So we have 3 contending hypotheses as to the origins of the apostles' belief that Jesus had risen from the dead and had appeared to them. We have the hypothesis they were telling the truth, or they were honestly mistaken, or they made it up. I'm sorry, but this.
Okay. The lunatic liar Lord argument.
Mm-hmm. I've never heard of this.
No. Okay. So the idea is that if you take a look at the resurrection and the story of the resurrection and the apostles having said that they witnessed it, then the argument goes that either they were crazy, that they were lying, or Jesus is risen and it's all true. And so they try and fit everything into these 3 categories, lunatic, liar, Lord. And they say, well, they couldn't have been crazy. Well, they couldn't have been lying. So it must be the final option.
When there's obviously a million more things it could have been.
Absolutely. And so they say, well, they couldn't have been lying because they had everything working against them. And that's something that came up in this call. Is this person said, well, why would they lie? It was not advantageous for them. In fact, a lot of them were killed, or persecuted because of their beliefs.
That's why we have saints and all that.
Yeah. But the problem is you could honestly believe something that's not true. Mm-hmm. And
have good reason to believe it.
Absolutely.
But you be wrong.
Totally. And that's kind of evidenced by a lot of different people who come out of modern day cults and say, hey, I saw my cult leader perform miracles. And even afterwards, they go, I have no idea how they did it. I saw it. But that's just kind of the experience that they went through. And so either we're going to validate all of those experiences, or we're going to go, you know what? Hey, I believe that you believe that.
Right.
That doesn't mean that comports to reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that they were necessarily lunatics. Don't think that they were necessarily liars. But that does not mean that Jesus is Lord.
Right.
And it also kicks out leprechauns. And
I know. They're fun.
Yeah. And every other possible creation myth. And
I mean, it could have been just, the telephone game. It could have been...
Absolutely. It could have been time travelers. It could have been...
aliens.
It could have been aliens. I mean, any of those have a whole lot less properties than...
Could have been the devil.
Oh, no. but that's the thing is there are a lot of different possible explanations that don't have as many assumptions as the God answer. And that's where Occam's razor comes in. The response with the fewest assumptions, or the conclusion that has the fewest, leaps like that, is most often the right one. Mm-hmm. So he jumps in, he gives the lunatic liar Lord argument, and then he backs it up a little bit by saying that it's mathematical, of course. So let's hop over there.
I'm sorry, but this is straightforward mathematics.
This is mathematics?
Because you multiply the relative strength, you multiply the evidence together, and so weak pieces of evidence, if you have enough of them, equates to strong evidence. Would you not agree with that?
That's interesting. I don't remember that. That's interesting looking back.
Right.
You multiply them together. That's
and you
funny.
Get strong evidence.
That's funny.
So that kind of goes towards Bayes' theorem. That it's something that a lot of apologists will bring up, and it sounds very technical because there's a lot of math involved. Bayes' theorem has to do with hypotheses on statistics. And so if you want to see what might likely be the cause of X statistic, you can apply Bayes' theorem. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that you should be applying it this way. Largely because what are the numbers involved?
It's interesting. It's kind of like he's confusing. Like, if you can use any kind of math on this, then you should be able to use all kinds of math on this.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what he's doing? Because that's why I say it's funny. Is because I've never really thought about that before.
Well, it may sound convincing when you first hear it, but if you're trying to work out what the odds are that someone is going to rise from the dead, you got to work out what those odds are. And we don't have experience of people rising from the dead like that. We have people being, misdiagnosed as dead, and later on finding out, holy crap, they're still alive. But that's not what's being told in the Bible story. And that's definitely not what, Christian apologists are saying happened. They're not saying that they thought Jesus was dead and he just kind of woke up.
Wouldn't the odds of that happening be zero though? Because we have billions of examples of it not happening. So we have like a factor of zero.
Almost, because we can't fall into the black swan fallacy. Just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean it hasn't happened or will never happen.
No, but it means that it's not logical to believe it. Definitely.
And it doesn't right? follow that you can put a good number on that as a something to work right. with. Also what it does is it is stacking together claims and going, okay, maybe this evidence was not super rigorously brought together. Maybe it's not as strong, but in the aggregate altogether, it is something super strong. It's like building a house of cards. Just because it's taller doesn't mean it's less likely to fall. And
how do you explain that to somebody, that just because you have more doesn't mean it's more correct? I mean, if they sincerely believe that, how do you convince them that that's not correct?
I've likened it to a house of cards or stacking poo. It doesn't stop being poo and there's more of it.
That works. That works. That helps.
Yeah. And so that was kind of the crux of the conversation, and watching it was interesting because y'all very, very honestly went about it. And I'll actually show you what Don's response was, because I thought that was pretty fun. Here's what Don had to say at the very beginning in response to that claim.
There are stories about apostles
Mm-hmm.
That's about as far as I would go.
Yeah, I agreed there. I was like, yeah, I can go with that.
There are stories about apostles. One of the things that is brought up is how exactly the resurrection story is brought about. He talks about the Apostle Paul a lot because Paul wrote a lot of the books. There's a problem with Paul, though. Paul never met Jesus. Not while Jesus was alive. No, Paul went by Saul first and tortured Christians, apparently, in the story. And on the road to Damascus had this miracle moment, then believed and changed his name to Paul.
Right. The angel told him to change his name.
Right. And kept going.
Yeah.
And so the idea that Paul would have this experience of the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ after the fact, okay, so the person who wrote about it wasn't there.
But that also sounds to me like the resurrection wasn't that special.
I do. So from what I do know, there are plenty of religions that have resurrection myths. And so it definitely wasn't unique at the time.
Okay, yeah.
But for Paul to be this main source that the caller is bringing up, it doesn't really help that much because it's secondhand at best.
Right.
Because Paul wasn't there. You know, people try and track it back. Oh, as early as, X year. And that got talked about a little bit. In fact, I'll show you the piece where that got talked about. It's right here.
Okay, because we have multiple lines of eyewitness testimony concerning the apostles. So, I mean, no serious, reputable scholar would debate that.
It's my understanding that the earliest document was Mark, and it was written around 90.
And I see that happen a lot. And while I appreciate the scholarship on it, I don't know. I feel like that gets a little bit off topic. And the reason I think it gets us off topic, and this is just me, is because even if it was written the day after, that doesn't necessarily mean what was written was true.
Right.
And somebody can believe something that not be the case in reality. And so it's more about the phenomenon, right? How often do we see the phenomenon of resurrection?
Right.
And then there are so many other things built into it. And I know that he said, oh, there are all these eyewitness testimonies. Well, not really. No, there's just a story. And in that story, it says that there are all these eyewitness testimonies. We can compare that to any fiction book where 5 people all see a thing. And, there was a tournament, and it was a soccer tournament or Harry Potter, right? They were playing Quidditch, and they name all the people who were playing and they describe the game. You could say, look, at all those eyewitnesses, all the people in the stands, all the people who were playing, who would possibly argue with you that that game wasn't played?
Yes.
Well, that's why we need extemporaneous works. That's why we need evidence outside, extra biblical evidence.
Well, what they say is that it's a bunch of books all put together, and so that is all of your extraneous evidence, nicely put together in a book for you.
Yes.
Like a science book.
And then from there, that's where some more in-depth critiques of the Bible come in. And I think that if people want to look into it, I think there are some really, really awesome books out there. If they want to check out the mythicist position, I suggest people check out Nailed, 10 Christian Myths That Prove That Jesus Never Existed at All.
There's also in the SHRM Journal, I partnered with the GCRR, which is the Global Center for Religious Research, and we're working together. And they have a SHRM Journal where he has some researchers who have posted a paper disproving the resurrection as well. And that's actually a pretty cool thing to check out.
Ooh, I like it. Yeah, so it's the claim around it and how it's being backed up. So cheers to that. I kind of want to look at what your response was, because at the very, very beginning, when he said, "Here's my statement," you had this response, and let me see if I can pull it up. It's right here.
So you wouldn't concede that the apostles claimed Jesus had risen from the dead and appeared to them?
I'm not personally convinced that the apostles actually are real. So
that blew his mind.
Yeah, I remember that.
and so when you said, "I'm not convinced that the apostles were real," were you saying that the people themselves didn't exist, or maybe the characters portrayed, right? So you could maybe have this fictionalized hyper version of someone, or what did you mean when you said that?
I meant that it could have been anything. It could have been that the stories were completely fake and made up. It could have meant that the story was fake, but the people were real. It could have meant that, the people were real, but the person writing it had their facts wrong. It could have, it could have been I don't know. Like, I don't know what it was.
Okay. Yeah, it definitely made him stumble. And so I kind of wanted to put that in, and ultimately I really liked where it went as a response from there. Here is you and Don.
I'm just curious how you deal with the eyewitness testimony from the Apostle Paul, because obviously he met the apostles, or so he claims. That's eyewitness testimony, is it not?
Interesting. So that's kind of like you saying you don't believe that Peter Pan exists, but my goal is to figure out why you think that that Peter Pan used,
fairy dust. I cut that off a little early. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. If you're appealing to the same story to back it up, you're just being circular.
Right.
And so, I mean, if the story itself assumes that the resurrection happened, then yeah, you're pulling from a tainted well. You need to have those outside sources. And I mean, unfortunately, if that was a one-time phenomenon, even if we grant that it happened, even if we grant that it happened, but the evidence isn't there for it, we don't have good reason to believe it. We just don't.
Not yet.
No, maybe it'll happen again. And then we can go back and we can take a look and see if the circumstances from the second event
Right. But
happened in the former.
till that day comes,
Yeah, we don't have it.
we're not going to pretend that it's going to be there.
Exactly. So kind of just to recap, the lunatic liar Lord argument, Bayesian analysis, the age of the Gospels. These are things that get brought up a lot when talking to apologetics or apologists about apologetics. And it's fine. And a lot of apologists are very, very well-meaning, but whether or not something, is old doesn't make it likely true. Just because in one story it says that 500 people saw a thing doesn't mean that you have 500 eyewitness accounts. That person said, he said Paul had taken all of these eyewitness accounts. We don't know that. All we know is that Paul is the writer here. And that's
He could have been the narrator. He could have been, the Shakespeare of the story. Who knows?
Exactly. Maybe he talked to 2 people, but it would have filled out better if he wrote, 5, 7, 10. And because of that, it's got a lot of work to do. It's not strong evidence. That said, the Peter Pan bit was great. And I like that. Yeah, you're withholding that judgment. It's not so much that you're saying, "Hey, I know for a fact that you're wrong." No, just bring good evidence before I believe you. That's it. That's it. And if we're going to, bet money on it, then no, I'm not going to bet my money on somebody rising up from the dead. I'm not going to bet my money on all of these different magical claims.
Even less. I'm not going to bet my life on it.
Agreed.
I'm not going to bet my time on it.
Agreed. And so I think it's awesome that we're doing what we're doing.
Me too. Thank you again. This is fun.
Absolutely. Jenna, just talking to you and hanging out with you is wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us again.
You too.
I can't wait until the next time we get together and do another episode like this. If people who are watching, if you have one that you'd love to see talked about, pop it down in the comments. Jenna, before you go, is there any way that people can follow you? Anything that you'd like to point them towards?
Yes, I have a show that I've started on YouTube. It's under my channel, Jenna Belk. So it's youtube.com/Jenna Belk. But the show that I'm doing is called Atheist Stasis. And then I'm also on AXP. I'm on the Atheist Experience, usually 1 or 2 Sundays a month right now. And so that's live at 4:30 p.m. Central on Sundays.
Cheers. I'm going to pop the links to both of those down there. And I'm also going to include the link to this specific episode or this specific clip so people can check it out on their own. Jenna, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you.
And I will talk to
too.
you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Alrighty, everybody. This has been a ton of fun. I've got more content coming out later. In the meantime, I want to thank my patrons and everyone else who's been getting the word out on this. If you like what I'm doing and you want to support it, consider going to patreon.com/Eric Murphy. That's patreon.com/Eric Murphy. It's those patrons, it's that support that is keeping me afloat right now. So if you can, I understand it's a rough time. If you can't, totally cool. But if you can, consider becoming a patron. Also, like, subscribe, share this out, and I'll see you next time. Bye.